everyone. It's another Live with CCO. We're going to have fun tonight. We have a great guest, and I can't wait to tell you more about her and how, I didn't even think to tell her we should say how we met because that would be important. Yeah, that we'll mention that too. Her name is Susan, and at our CCO Lives that it's a casual night where you can ask questions. We're not as formal as we usually are with our webinars. We have a good time, ultimately. But feel free to ask questions along. I'll be watching, and Boyd will be watching to see if there's anything that we can share with Susan or questions that are applicable besides the questions that I ask her. This is our live CCO with number 35. It just seems like the other day we were starting these special CCO lives, and it's been a lot of fun. The topic tonight, because of our guest Susan, is how to get a job investigating medical coding fraud. Now, she informed me that fraud is a unique word, and I'll let her explain that in a minute, that it's more broad. The verbiage that they use may not be fraud. But I have had lots of people tell me when we go out to conferences or guest speaking and things, and they'll make a comment. It's like, how do I get into that? It's like, I don't know. I've only met one other person that did that line of work and found it very fascinating, kind of picked her brain. But again, she, it's unique, I think, as Susan will be able to tell us. We're going to show you her website, Habanero Inc., at the end. And just real quick, I want to mention that on top of the credentials, she also has her CPMA, which is very applicable to what we're going to talk about tonight. So, Susan, how would you want somebody to introduce you if I was doing a better job of it? What would you want to tell people?
Well, I think you did a great job. Thank you. And also thank you for inviting me. This is going to be a lot of fun, I can tell. So I guess the way I introduce myself in this particular arena is, if anyone is a Star Trek fan, think of Counselor Troya. I do the translation between the aliens, who might be the doctors, and the attorneys, who might be, I don't know, the people on the starship, because depends on who you're working with and what side you're on, but they don't speak the same language. And if they're going to work together, either defending somebody who's been accused of not doing things the right way, or if you're on the end of thinking someone might be not doing things the right way, those people don't speak the same language. They're very high-level professionals. They're usually very smart people, but they need that translation. So that's how I describe that kind of work.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, continue.
Do we need to start over, Boyd?
No, you're good. You were live. You're fine. Just in GoToWebinar. You're fine.
Okay. Well, when you said that made me think, Susan, that I use the same description when I'm talking to providers and I'm trying to tell them, what our purpose is, what our role is as coders and educators, is that we're your liaison, and we're your translator. But just like, I know sign language, and that's where I first got into understanding what a translator's purpose was, that we can only translate what you document into the code set. And, but there's other options available to you, because the code set, is defined, and sometimes it's very broad and sometimes it's narrow, but you don't know how I can translate it. You just know that this is what you want it to say. So I translate what you say, and if there is more opportunities, I let you know that there's specificity, and you let me know if that fits. It's a lot of fun to get to do it when you think of it that way, right?
And I would actually use that same analogy if I was on a project where, let's just say, after the questions about was something right or wrong done, a lot of times there's a corrective action plan put in place. And part of that is to help at that point, you're translating between the provider and the payer. So you need to help the provider understand the payer is only going to hear things one certain way. You need to be able to learn how to describe things in the way that's going to help them understand and be able to process your claims and pay you the way you should be.
Oh, I thought of another analogy. What about you've heard about the blind fellas touching the elephant and had to describe them? You've heard that one, right?
Yeah.
Where one guy says, well, he's got it's a tail, and then another one touch the trunk, and because you only know what your background is. So as a coder or an educator or an auditor, you have to understand both parties if you're translating from, like you said, from the perspective of the provider and from the perspective of the lawyer. They don't speak the same, so you have to be able to understand both sides, right?
Yeah, that's where I find that I'm able to make a difference.
Yeah, that's really a unique niche. Okay, so your career, your job, is there more to it than that? Was there anything you could expand upon about what you actually do?
So the way I describe it is what I do is those filling in the places, filling in the blanks in the world of healthcare reimbursement. So you probably don't want me talking to your patients, but talking to the machines, watching workflow, watching operational workflow. My training is originally as a project manager. So if you know anything about project management, that takes the whole picture and says, what are all the pieces? How do they fit together? And how can we make it more profitable or work more smoothly or efficiently? Or what things are we doing that aren't making sense? So that's really, I feel like, what I bring.
What about, you hear people talk about coding and they say, well, I'm detail oriented, so I think I would be a good coder, which I'm not detail orientated and I'm a good coder, but it's because there's different niches that you can have in this arena in the medical field and everything. So would that be something, if somebody had those traits, would that be beneficial to them? Or
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think that when you talk about coding and careers in coding, I think the field is so wide. There's so many different opportunities for so many different kinds of things that you could potentially get into. So look at how many doctors wind up getting their coding certifications so that they can understand better. I know a lot of attorneys.
I think Z Health, look, they've made a whole career, and opened a company just, focusing on coding.
Yeah, you have people who want to be able to just churn things out and have their head down and work at their own pace on their own schedule. And if you get really good at that and figure out how to hit the right metrics, that can be a terrific career. There are a lot of people who get into revenue cycle management, which is, taking it to the next level. There are people who help write the regulations or, it's so wide, it's so vast, the opportunities.
I thought of something else as I was saying, it kind of leads into this next question, but for what you're doing now in your career, do you need a degree?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure. Let me
tell you why I think of that. Let me tell you what popped into my head is because, one, you don't have to have a degree to be a coder. You can have a plethora of credentials and not have any degree behind your name and be well respected, right? However, if you're working for lawyers and providers, do they look at that and think, well, they don't even have a degree? Well, you got all these, but what would you say?
That is such an interesting question. And I will tell you that opportunities opened up for me like crazy when I got certified as a coder. So I had been in the arena of coding for years, but never been a production coder or never, did it as a professional. It was always just a tangent. But as it became more important and more respected, maybe is a better word for it, I now have people. One of the most exciting assignments that I wound up getting on, I worked with an offshore company on a special project, and they were specifically interested in having a coder. Now, of course, when we got there, that did not turn out to be exactly what they needed.
Yeah.
But they were possessed. They had to have someone who
Yeah.
was a certified coder. And that's how I get so many of my jobs, so many of
I
the
really
projects.
think that I really think that college degrees don't carry the weight that they used to now that the credentials have been around for, over a decade, or not a decade. I want to say, the AAPC's got 30 years under their belt now, but the AHIMA has been out since the 20s, So I think you're right that coding credential kind of carries more weight than having a master's degree in finance or something, because that could be great, but if you don't know the code set and understand
I
that,
think it
it doesn't
depends on
help you
what
at
you
all.
want to do with it, but there's no doubt about it. Knowing that code set and knowing how to make it work, knowing the ticking that goes on behind it and what it makes possible, and that definitely makes a huge difference.
We can't talk up the knowledge of the code sets anymore. We're just probably both nuts about them. Let's see, did we cover how would you advise someone looking to follow your path? How would they go about it then?
So before I got hardcore into coding, my background was more well-rounded. I started, as I said, as a project manager, and I worked, I guess if I would say what my advice to someone would be to get as broad experience as possible. Work for a billing company, do some work for a payor, get involved in audits and read up on the OIG and how do they track down their cases and what do they do when they find somebody who's not doing the right thing. Those kind of things.
I've noticed that people that are willing to, like you said, read, they're always looking at something where, now we don't, magazines aren't like what they used to be, but you can go online and you can access everything, the OIG, and CMS, all of these big websites, and even CCO. I mean, we're always putting out, letting you know when an article was beneficial and stuff. The coding clinic, staying on top of that and keeping fresh, like in the old days when, you got up every morning and you read the newspaper. And if you read your local newspaper, that was good. But then when you also got like the big city newspaper, and then you got one of the national, then you really were articulate and knew what was happening, that was relatable. So I think that's good advice. There's a couple statements came in. Let me look at those real quick. Cindy says she's sitting for the CPMA in September, so good for her. Let's see if I can get this without my mouse is caught. And says, would love to learn about fraud after my last job was audited. You're right. That's a way to get the experience, because until you're audited, you may not even know that something was wrong, depending on what type of an audit it was.
So I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute and say, an audit should never be a surprise. You should be doing your own audits. And, you asked me, what would I advise someone to look for or to do to follow my path? Well, one of them would be make sure you look inside first, because if you audit yourself, or if you audit the place that you're at, that, where you happen to be working, you can find out a lot and you can head off problems before they become a problem. As a matter of fact, every single practice should be doing that. Everyone is supposed to have a compliance plan. Part of the compliance plan is supposed to be performing regular internal audits and reporting on them. And I am going to tell you, I work with a lot of practices that's not part of their regular routine. So yes, Cindy, when you get caught by surprise like that with an external audit, it can really shake things up. So if you want to be, so I'm going to give a tip here to the coders. If you want to do something to differentiate yourself, you have to be careful. It's a line to walk on that, but find out if there's been an internal audit done and volunteer to do it. And
brilliant.
Yeah,
I can tell you that one of the things that I tell students that, because if they're nervous and they talk about, what if I make a mistake and stuff like that? And I always tell them, I said, well, first of all, you're going to be audited constantly. And if you're not, that's a problem. So get used to being audited. It's a good thing because you want to know if you're making mistakes, or otherwise you can't educate yourself. And then also you want to be working in a place that routinely holds internal audits and has external audits coming in. They pay somebody to come in and do an external audit before the people that are paid to find mistakes come in and do it. So auditing is not a bad word. It's a good thing to have happen. I worked home health, and that's the first place that I experienced the value of audits, because after the 80s, this would have been in the 90s, the early 2000s, they were getting their butt kicked and losing money, and they were constantly being looked at. And the company that I worked for was just real sticklers for constantly auditing themselves, having other offices come in and audit you, and then they always made good audits. And so, yeah, that's really good advice.
So another tip is to find a partner and audit each other, right? Audit and review is a term that you can interchange. Audit sometimes is a bad word, but review, you can call it a review. But buddy up with a partner and check each other's work.
That's a good idea, because we always, CCO, one of the main things we get for questions that come in to our club are someone saying, we have the scenario that's happening in the office. Half the office thinks that it should be coded this way. The other half of the office thinks it should be coded this way. And neither one of us have a way to back up what we believe, or they do, but, and so they're trying to have somebody give them another opinion, but also, where do I find the resources to back up what I think to be true? And Jennifer says, I do auditing for medical attorneys, and they did not care about my degree. They took the fact that I teach coding as my credential and my credentials. I teach coding, even in depositions I've taken part in. Other attorneys will make sure to call out that it doesn't require a formal education to do this, since we use manuals. That's a good point too, for them to let them know that, say, hey, it's not a degree thing, it's a certification thing that bears weight. So the future, what does it look like for what you do? Do you see any big changes coming in the future?
That is actually one of the things I love about this work. It is never the same. It doesn't get boring. So
I get bored easy.
Even the changes that are coming in 2021, right? So big E&M changes. E&M hasn't changed in a couple of decades.
No.
Yeah. So that's a big change. ICD-10 was big.
I love that one.
Even all the stuff that's going to be happening with this pandemic. Just so everybody knows, those audits have started. And if your facility or your provider has not done internal audits to make sure that the 3 times in one day that Medicare changed their rules.
Didn't they just talk about that today in the group we're on?
Gosh.
Is that what they were talking about? Yeah.
So, you should be, I've heard of external audits based on that. And I'm doing an internal one as part of a compliance audit for a practice, and big on the telehealth. And I also get calls. I work with a lot of billing companies, and I get calls all the time. They'll say, my client is trying to bill this. Is this right?
Yeah, that's
because there are a lot of changes with this pandemic, right? Telehealth, all new codes for diagnoses, new codes for the different tests that they were doing. So
just having a code drop in the middle of the code set, year is unprecedented, right? Never had
doesn't happen
code,
often. That's correct.
Boom, so that was exciting. just real quick then, let's mention how we know each other through a online Facebook group, and I always say it wrong. It's Jobs for American Medical Coders. Yeah, and so some of us that do presentations and education and stuff are on a little subgroup where we work together, and so we're always chatting in there about, hey, what do you, what advice would you give, or this, or that, or or just instruments. And I know some of them are going to those CMS and those webinars that are dropping almost daily, or what, they're weekly. They're sitting in and watching those, and trying to just stay on top of the telehealth changes and everything. So it's really important to network and be a part of a group. We all have different backgrounds too, which is kind of cool.
Different skill sets. And
exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So that is actually another really important thing if someone is trying to figure out, what do you want to do to follow the path of somebody like you or somebody like me? Yeah. You can't know too many people. And I'll tell you another thing. Yes. I'm self-employed, and I know a lot of self-employed people who get very possessive and very, and to me, there are thousands of hospitals, hundreds of thousands of different kinds of providers, all these different insurance companies. There is more than enough work for everybody, and it's so complicated and so hard to keep up with. Why not find other people who are smarter than you and know things you don't know and all that other stuff, so that when you're in a jam, you can reach out, and it also makes you feel good when someone else has a question and you can answer it for them. So
absolutely, that's a real boom for the ego. And I know, because I keep my eye on that conversation that pops up, and I was like, nope, I don't know anything about that. And I'll go back to workers. I was like, hey, wait a minute, did they say, is there a diagnosis in there? What? Yep, I know, and
yes.
And I like also that you said before to kind of do everything, because it allows you, one, to realize where your passion is, and your passion may change. But I thought I'd really like billing. I didn't like it at all. So I did it for a year. I learned an amazing amount of information, but that's not where I found that joy in what I do. But I got to feel around with different areas, different arenas to see the best fit, and that's going to be beneficial. We got a bunch of other things popping up. Let me hit the next slide, and then let's just look here. Let's see. Cindy had said a good suggestion to get a good auditing tool. We'll come back to that. Whitney says, do you have any suggestions when an auditor disagrees with you over such a small things? How do you handle that?
So that's actually one of you talked about our little group. That was one of the conversations that came up today. And, it really has to do, to me, it has to do with what's the structure of the organization and how what are the audits meant to do? So if the audit is meant to help everyone stay on their game and for educational purposes, it's different than if you've got an external auditor that's trying to take money back from you, or if you work in an environment where you have to think of diplomatic ways to say this, but there are a lot of places that the coder does not have the respect that they might have in other places.
You're right. That is very true.
So sometimes the auditor is given more power than they should, or there isn't a strong enough intermediary or referee around for when the coder and the auditor disagree. And another thing to keep in mind for me, and maybe this is from spending so much time doing so much of the legal work, so many people to me seem to think coding is cut and dry. It's black or it's white, and you can go to the mat on it.
I know.
There's so many times, like for example, if you're going to say a wrist x-ray and an ankle x-ray, that's pretty clear. It's one CPT code or the other. And if you get that wrong as a coder, you deserve the ding. But so many of the others, especially when you get into complicated conditions that people have, or trying to interpret the provider's documentation. And
oh yeah,
thankfully, there's not a lot of handwritten notes around anymore.
I know,
But,
that's nice.
but
I had my time with that.
But how many times have you seen a transcribed note that makes no sense because they didn't go back and look at it? So, you know, and you don't always have the option to query the provider. So a lot of it depends on how your organization is set up and what is the purpose of the interaction between the auditor and the coder.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Let's see what else we got here real quick, because we've kind of gone over this question. Let's get some more. Let's see. Alicia Fredericks, can a CPC-A volunteer at the OIG having only a retail or customer service background?
I have no,
yeah,
I have no, I don't know anything about that.
You know, that would be
that organization.
That would be networking, right? Sometimes the way you get in to finding out there's openings or finding out that you could volunteer is networking on several levels and letting people know what you're interested in. And then they say, hey, I heard, you know, I know one lady got a job because she went to one of the local chapter meetings. It was her first time, and she was saying, you know, that she was new and what her background was. She had a really great background, and she one of the other people said, well, Dr. So-and-so's you know, person is pregnant. They're going to be going, you know, on maternity leave, and he's looking, but he just hasn't posted anything yet. And she went in there immediately and she got the job, you know, and so that was cool. Let's see, what's the best way for a new CPC to get a job, job experience? I would like to work remote. This is something we hear all the time. So I would be interested to hear what your advice would be.
So a few things. First of all, and I will tell you how I have had a couple of people who were either studying for their certifications or trying to decide if it was something that they wanted to do. I have had people do administrative type work for me with my other projects, updating spreadsheets, looking things up, doing research, things like that, to get a taste of it and to see, is this something that might interest you? So it wasn't a high paying venture, but and it wasn't full time either. So I'm just thinking of one particular woman. She worked, I don't know, 4 or 6 hours a week for a modest rate and got a taste of what it was like to be in that world and to see that information and see how the data flowed and what it meant. And she went on to get her RHIT, and she had been working clerical in one of our hospitals, and she's now an inpatient coder. She loves it.
Yeah.
So, and even some of the ways that I started, can I tell you how I started in the coding arena so many years ago? I had been working for a consulting company, and one of my friends was a chiropractor and was pulling her hair out because she wasn't making money. So it was a similar thing, modest number of hours for, I'm probably more for free than for a modest pay. But I spent a couple months with her, again, just a few hours a week, and learned so much. I worked her front desk, I did her billing, and when she was ready to hire somebody else, when we got all these things straightened out, I helped train the person who was going to do it for her full time. So, and she was able to then quit her regular job and open a chiropractic practice full time. And I'll tell you, it's so interesting. And this kind of goes into the next question you have, which is do you want to ask it?
No, what personal traits do you feel that have helped you in your career?
So here I am at this chiropractor's office answering the phones and snooping around through all the paperwork and all the books. And I realize that she's got some federal employees that have never gotten paid. And I look up and I find the fee schedule and I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are going to pay you a fortune. You have to figure out how to get this done. And it wasn't easy. If you've ever had to get onto the federal program, the federal employees program, it's not easy. But once she did, so then I was able to say to her, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to go to the Coast Guard station. You need to go to the post office. You need to go all these places and find these federal employees, make some kind of deal. This was, I think you were able to make deals better in those days too. Make some kind of deal, tell everyone that they need to bring their whole family to you. And she had a terrific revenue stream from the federal employees. So those, to be able to think outside the box and look at things from a different perspective and not always have that narrow, okay, what's my code? Or what rule is going to tell me what code to use?
Right. I used I was telling somebody, I think it was on the last webinar that we did, and I said, there, I have names for different types of coding jobs, like risk adjustment. If you work for an MA plan, I said, you're like an in the trenches coder, because you don't get to query the provider. You can't look outside of your scope, and you're looking at a year's worth of documentation. So there's like blinders on each side. You're just in the trenches doing, one thing, but it's fun, because you get to look at a year's worth of documentation from people all over the United States, all kinds of providers, all kinds of documentation, et cetera, et cetera. I said, but then when you get to like a clinic provider, that's I call, it's probably not the best term, like a basic, that's very common. You get to see all kinds of diagnoses, but you have one provider or a dozen or whatever, but you get to see a lot, but you get to interact with the provider and maybe even billing and several aspects. And then you have things that are like
learn their
inpatient
patterns. You learn the provider's patterns when you have just a few of them, and they're more malleable that way because you can then. They're easier to train. If you can gain their trust, they're easier to train.
And you have that relationship built up where they're teaching you and you're teaching them. And so I said, that's you're right. And then, you have your inpatient, then you have people that break out into those really exciting spheres of other opportunities like what you do and getting into education and stuff. So yeah, that's really cool. Let me just double check if there's anything else. Oh, well, she said, can you talk about the CHTS-TR credential?
So, that is really interesting. Part of the ACA, and I did read the entire regulation. Actually, I read all 3 versions of it before it was finalized for a couple of reasons. But part of that included education of the workforce. So there was this whole program. It was called HITPRO, Health Information Technology Professionals. And the idea behind that was to train, they had 6 different categories of people that they were training to be able to just up their game in healthcare. There was programming, there was for the clinicians, and the one that I wound up with was for trainer. So it's, oh God, certified health. You know what? I'm sorry, I don't know what it is, but the trainer, I don't know it offhand, but the trainer is the TR. So, but it didn't last. It was only funded for a certain period of time. But you took the class. You took the class. You got certified. They actually get the exam totally different than how AAPC does it.
Really?
You went into a testing center where you were scanned, and it was it was like going for some kind of, I don't know, like a federal job or something. So, and then what, you passed that, and
that's really interesting.
That was that designation. And AHIMA was monitoring it for a while, and then AHIMA stopped.
Yeah. So is it still something that so in other words, it's done. Once you get it, nobody else can follow in those footsteps.
You
have to check and see, right?
Yeah, I don't know the details on it, but I earned it, and I kept up with it for as long as somebody was keeping up with it.
Good. And, Debbie says, when our system goes down, the paper copies are 90% illegible. Now, see, Susan and I have been around long enough to know when 90% of everything was written, and
80 of the 90% was illegible.
Yeah. That's where you learned your providers. I had this one provider, Dr. Ledbetter, and all of his penmanship was gorgeous. It was very linear and beautiful. All the lines were like this. The problem is it all looked like barcodes almost. And you couldn't distinguish what the words were because they all looked, but it was beautiful. I remember that.
That's actually a really interesting thing that's challenging when you're auditing, when you're doing auditing, because if you've got a provider who can't read their own writing too sometimes, that's really a problem. But yeah, I feel for them when they have to go to the paper, because the providers don't like it either, you know.
No, they want to just treat people. They don't want to have to. Let's see. Ayla says, how should we start the discussion of an audit with not good results with the coder? So if you got to give a bad audit, how do you approach that person, or how do you start the conversation after the audit?
So again, it's a matter of where I am in that relationship, or what the structure or the purpose of it is. But let's just say best case scenario, this is one of my employees and I want them to be able to get better and improve. What I might ask them to do is to audit themselves on those same cases, and using the audit tool and the criteria, and see what they come up with, and then take it from there. But if they have to look it through themselves, that would also give you an idea of maybe what the root cause of their problem is. Because when you're doing all of these different analyses, root cause is really what you want to get to if you're going to fix anything.
Yeah.
Does the person really not understand? Do they have one weak spot? Have they been scamming everybody all along somehow? Some people are really good at that.
Yeah, they are.
Fake it till you make it, right?
That's right. That's something that people really do believe in. Jennifer says, my goal is to start a company to train providers on coding, since they do not learn in school. Jennifer, I agree. One of the things I've always wanted to do was get into the medical schools, maybe even in pre-med, but have them take a course in basic understanding of the code sets, so that when they get in there, they have that understanding, because it's just thrust on them when they get out.
I would be really surprised if they're not doing some of that these days, because
these days, probably.
Yeah, because I find that newer graduates are more familiar with, they've just got a broader sense than just, just the treatment of people. They're learning more about business, how to work with others. I think the education that they're receiving is probably a little different.
One of the things that, it's true, because I've worked with some new providers. They've got out there, they're ready to practice, that they're starting a new, with a new hospital system and everything, and seeing the stuff that they have to go through to get onboarded. And part of that's like me coming in and said, okay, now all these people have told you about the coding and everything. This is not the way I say it, of course, but now I'm going to come in and tell you about risk adjustment. So throw everything else out the door that you know about, because this is how the government's going to pay you, and they pay, there's more of them than, and so I know it's hard for them to have to, they just want to treat people and make them better.
You know what? They're smart people. If they have the teaching and the information, a lot of them will get the gist. Let's put it that way.
And you know what? They didn't get through med school without having some extra gray cells in there.
I think that older providers who have been practicing for a really long time, everything was so different. So I feel bad for a lot of them, because if you weren't able to do all the gyrations to keep up, it was really hard and stressful.
Yes.
And also, it used to just be a totally different revenue stream being a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
And it just isn't the same anymore. I'm sorry, you got a question.
I was going to say, we have a guy asking a question. Yay, it's a man. I always make a big deal when I go to conferences and everything, because there's not as many men in our career field as there are women. And one time I was talking to a couple that came to our booth, and Laureen and I were there, and I was talking to her, right? And finally she said, he's the coder. I'm just the wife. I came to the conference like, I'm so sorry, So I make, yeah. Jack says, try getting a dentist to bill medical for medical diagnosis and document to a standard more than problem focused. Yeah,
Good luck with that, Jack.
Yeah, I know.
Good luck with that, Jack.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just flip the slide. I've got multiple monitors and my roller mouse is trying to decide which go. If you could do anything else for a career, what would you be doing?
I really almost wish that that I had had a better path laid out. I would totally be an attorney.
Yeah, yeah. You're working with them, and you know that you've got that. It clicks for you, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, you guys may not know this, but Susan also works a lot in radio, so you'll have to go in and see some of her. We'll make sure it can when we show them your website. Will they be able to get in and see some of those interviews?
I hope so. I hope so.
Good.
There's a whole YouTube channel.
So, what is your favorite personal feature? I always I asked this for a couple. It's completely off topic because one of the things that I think that we are so focused maybe on our careers, what we do and everything. And talking about audits kind of make you nervous. It's like the IRS coming, they're going to find that they're going to tell me what I do wrong, and so I think it's important to focus on things about ourselves that we like instead of the negative about ourselves, right? I don't like my teeth. I don't like my hair. I don't like, so I had, I wanted to know, I asked Marie the same question, but what is it about you that you really like about yourself? I always thought, I like my eyebrows. I got my dad's eyebrows and I never have to pluck them or anything, hardly ever. And it's like, that's weird. I just like my eyebrows. So what is there about you that you really like about yourself?
I will say I really do. I do like the voice. I
like your voice too.
I've always had a lot of fun with my voice. And it can do a lot of different things. I could put on the New York if you know what I'm talking about.
That's right, because tell them where you're at right now.
I'm from New York.
You're from New York.
You know what I'm talking about? We'll have some coffee one of these days.
But I don't think I've told this story in a long time, but when we were in St. Louis and my husband was at seminary, of course, there was people there. We were in married housing, and in married housing, we all had lots of children. It was like 200 children there. But my oldest son, number one, I call him, him and a group of his friends, they were from all over the United States. And this one young guy was from Boston. He had the best voice and the best accent. And one time my son he was homeschooled for that year, but he took Latin and drama at the high school and chemistry. So I went to go pick him up, and this particular young man was sitting out front waiting to be picked up. And I had one of the children in the back of the van and I had to go to the bathroom. And so he came over and he was chatting with me. I said, would you stay in the van with the babies so that I could go to the bathroom? Sure. And then I said, well, where do I need to go? And he said, well, just go over there to that door. He went on and on and on, and finally, and I'd say, where, which one did you say? And by the third time that I made him repeat it, he said, Mrs. Scott, are you making fun of me? And I said, yes, I am. I loved his accent. I loved it. I just kept making him repeat it. Daw, daw, daw. And so it was fun to see them grow up, and I love unique voices. I'm glad. You guys are going to have to listen to her radio and the stuff that she did. Let me just double check that because we're almost to the end. We are doing really good with time. Cindy says, when I first started, a CMS 1500 form had to be completed on a typewriter. Do you remember those?
Yes. And I remember getting the sheet of them.
Yes.
That came in the box. Yes, yeah. With the holes. And that was one of my first jobs, was creating hundreds and thousands of them at the same time. One of the consulting companies I worked for. It used to be called, well, what is now called RAC. The company that I was working with in the 80s pioneered that whole technology of,
wow.
and in those days you didn't go after the hospital to tell them that, you know, that they did it wrong. You would just bill the right party and then yeah, and
Clean up
get it
afterwards.
that way.
When I was teaching at the college, one of the components was the billing. I taught the billing as well. And the program, the course had over 100 cases with the information to be put into 1,500 forms. And I made them do them all. They had the system, and they literally had to look at the book with the information that you would be given, just like the patient, you know, the patient information. They had to put all that content into the 1,500 form, and then they would print them off. They would do like 25 at a time, and then I would go in with a yellow highlighter, and I would just highlight anything that wasn't correct, and then make them do it again until it was a clean bill. Is what I, you know, and you would think that would take a long time to do 100, but it doesn't. No, because it's just data entry for the most part. But they seem to be familiar with RVUs and money, but not the coding. Correct. So many people understand the RVUs. What do you think? Jennifer said, I think she means they. I mean, I think she means the providers.
Okay. You know, that depends totally too on their orientation. If they're with a hospital or a group, and RVU is the basis for their compensation, I'm sure they're going to be all about the RVUs.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And with risk adjustment, gosh, I'm, you know, since I do that, it's all about the diagnosis, and, you know, and still like with the RVUs, but on a completely different level.
Yeah.
That is the last of those questions. Let me hit the next slide. Oh, goody. Okay, so we got about 10 minutes to wrap up, and now we want to highlight your website. So it's Habanero Inc. And just, you want to tell everybody what services you provide and what the company does?
Okay, so what we do is we do strictly project-based work. So we often get asked to come on full time, but that's not what we do. And it's actually harder in some ways, but it's a lot more fun to do it that way, in my opinion. We get involved in everything from, we do, as we've talked about before, legal work, where I'm doing that translation work. A lot of times a provider will call me when they get that Dear Doctor letter from a payor, and I help them determine if it's, oh no, this is just, they're just looking for the risk adjustment stuff, go ahead, and I said, don't you sit there and make all the copies, you let them come in. Or is it something that we can do together with them? And I always tell them, you always want to make sure that somebody else looks at everything before you send it in. I can't tell you how many clients or how many providers have had, oh yeah, just have one of the clerks send all this in for a Medicare TPE request. So, and there's other times where you look at what's going on and you say, do you have legal counsel? If not, I have a couple people that I might recommend that you talk to. And then I don't talk to them again until they engage someone. And then we have a agreement where, you know, they can talk to me and I can talk to them openly without having to worry about, you know,
right.
Yeah. So we do
somebody coming back in.
So yeah, we do compliance audits. So we will set up an audit program at your place. We will help you. We will either do it all for you, or we will help you set it up and train your staff. And then we can do the external audit. A lot of places do their own have a regular compliance program. Education. Right, so that's something that always is a component in things, whether or not you want it to be. Operational reviews. Sometimes I'll have an accountant that will call me and say, I know there's something going on here. This doctor should be making more money. Can you help us figure out what it is? And that's more of an operational review where you sit there and you can look and see, well, there's way too many staff members here and they're not doing things in an efficient way. So let's help you get some efficiency, and then you can have less FTEs. We get involved in cases where we are looking for the F word and finding out whether or not there are patterns. And really, that's really what that is all about. And we made a little bit of a joke about it before, but to me, that is a legal term and it's got a very specific legal definition. So I don't use it, but I do participate in projects where that's an issue and on both sides of it. And if any provider wants to help themselves and fix what they're doing and get on the right path, I'm happy to help with that. And if they're not, I'm not able to help them really. And some of them want somebody to help them cheat. So,
yeah.
You know, we talked before about what are some of the characteristics. And to me, one of the biggest ones is integrity, because I'm the only one that has to sleep with myself at night.
Yeah.
So,
you're right.
Yeah.
Yes,
So I have turned down projects because it didn't seem like the people who were responsible were interested in making sure the right thing was happening.
My dogs are barking in the other room, so I keep trying to mute every time they do, and I keep looking down. So if you wonder why my eyes are like, I don't want to hear you there. So one of the things that stood out that you said is that, you know, you're focused. You do one thing. It's not that you do one thing. You offer a service. You don't come in and work full time for them. You're not interested in picking up contracts and staying with them and everything. Because again, if you go in and fix a problem or make them aware of a problem and educate them, they're like, well, then can I just hire you to make sure this never happens again? And so that's where the networking really plays a big part too, because then you can say, no, I don't do that. Because CCO does that. It's like, we do education. Oh, we've been asked to do all kinds of other things. Yes, we could, but we do education and we do it well. So we want to stay in that and not spread ourselves too thin. And so you guys are doing that too, in that this is what we do. This is our focus. And then, we'll help you find somebody else to come in, or we'll give you some, a few names of some lawyers or some management companies or whatever that you need. So if people have those services, then it'd be good for them to look into contacting you and letting them know what you offer. No, that's not, I wanted to say that differently. What they offer, so that you might be able to help somebody find a good fit.
Yes, I'm always interested in getting to know other people, other smart people who are doing interesting things in this space, because I always learn something.
Yeah, yeah. And you can, like you said, with the OB, it's like, you know what? I know somebody that does that, and they're looking to pick up another clinic or whatever, that she might be interested, or he might be interested in helping you out. So that's good. Networking is always a wonderful thing. I wanted to mention that if you want to send Susan an email, it's real easy to find her at info@habaneroinc.com, and that's where you can find her website. Also really easy, habaneroinc.com. And there's her logo right there, but I also saved her website, and I can just pull this over here to kind of give you an idea of what her main screen looks like, and then ways to contact her and her organization right there. So it's super easy. Anything that you want to tell them about your website or any other, just to wrap up in our last 5 minutes?
I would just say, if anyone's interested in connecting with me, I'm sure they will. And I wasn't necessarily doing this to promote myself or my company, but I would just like to say, if people are interested in figuring out what other kinds of opportunities there are in the coding world, talk to people and really think about what what are you interested in? Some people, as you said before, are interested in, I just want to be able to put my head down, work from home, and get my job done and then leave. And then other people are like, you know what, I want to always be learning something new, or I want to be able to travel. There's just so many options. So think about what it is you want. And if you're interested in coding, or if you're already a coder, and maybe your current thing isn't quite up your alley or floating your boat, figure out what might do that.
Going to conferences and going to local chapter meetings and stuff like that for different organizations, not just one, being a part of different organizations and reading, being connected with, gosh, I guess not, what do you call magazines now? Blogs, I guess. I don't know what they call them. But just being out there and involved will maybe connect you with something that'll be a new passion of yours. Like I mentioned earlier, I get bored easy. There's stuff I like, but you know, I'm one of those ones I constantly want to learn. But I know some that are like you mentioned the first, where no, they love what they do, but that's all they want to do. You know, it's like, nope, I'm fulfilled. I'm doing this. I love it. I don't want to get involved in anything else. And this is my comfort zone, and I'm happy there. And I'm like, you know, I get shiny object syndrome, I think. SOS, is that what they call it? Laureen has that too. And because I always want to learn. Now, am I going to go into that arena? No, but I want to know about it. And that way you can share it with somebody else, right? If someone says, well, I'm interested in getting into audits and doing education and for providers. I know somebody. Susan knows how to do that. You know,
well, what I like is no matter where I wind up, so often what winds up occurring is not what they originally thought they wanted or needed. So to me,
outside
the work
eyes
that I
coming in and
do,
looking.
that it's that versatility and the other thing is the ability to make the communication. How do you sit there and tell the CEO of the company that is spending all this money to bring you in that he's the problem?
I'm reading books on how to do that now.
Yes, it's a very delicate balance, but it can be done. And you know, it's an art. And if you can do that, and that person is able to, if you can find that line between telling that person what they need to do to help solve the problem, and they can see it, and then they can fix it, and they see the results, they will tell all their friends about you.
That's right. And you weren't afraid to come up and tell them the bad news. That is very important. And you know what, that just to wrap up, then I think a good way to do that would be to say that your skill set is not just coding. Your skill set has to be broader. That's why, you know, I always said I like to focus every year on something new. So like one year I focused on oncology, another one cardiology, and, you know, I would go through these different things. But this past year I have been doing like personal development type things, you know, how to be a better communicator, how to be aware of my surroundings, all kinds of things on a personal level to make me both a better educator, but also to help me become a better listener. And because we were talking before, it's like I'm a and sometimes Susan said sometimes you just have to pause, and I'm afraid of that quiet noise, you know, in a conversation. And she was advised like, that's good, you know, I'm writing notes, you're right, wait for the pause, live for the pause. And so maybe you need to learn Excel better. That's very, very common. And, you know, don't overlook the clerical skills that you need to learn. And you can learn that stuff on YouTube, you know, and to get helpful tips. And also, like, or maybe it's just your appearance. You know, maybe you need to go, if you're going to have to start being in front of people or talking to people, you need to dress more professionally. So, you know, find somebody to give you advice on what looks good on your body type. Maybe it's that, you know, that brings confidence. So it isn't just about the book learning and becoming a great coder. If you don't have a good presence about yourself, if you're not articulate, if you know, like you can't use communicating online and remote, or just a whole plethora of things I could mention, you could be the best coder in the world and you're not going to be able to move forward. So again, think outside the box. Think outside the box for your personal education, personal skill sets, and your networking. All of that. You've been so much fun, Susan. I can't wait. Sometime we'll get together and we'll meet in person. And
That'd
I want
be
you to make
wonderful.
sure you talk like from New York, because that just makes me happy to hear people that talk differently than me. And you do have a really fabulous voice. But
I'll do my taxi cab
everybody,
whistle for you when I see you.
that would be so much fun. That would be great.
It works too.
I want to remind everybody to go to cco.us if you want to join our club. This information, this webinar, and the transcript, the slide deck, everything will be on the CCO Club, exclusive for them. And so you'll always have that information at your fingertips, how to reach out to Susan. And then also, I would encourage you to go to the Jobs for American Medical Coders, because that's a really large group, and they're very positive. People from all areas of the career are in there. And, like Susan and I met, you may find a group that is maybe near you, or if you're working on education, the whole gamut. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and it's one it's a group that's vetted and active. There's a lot of coding and type groups out there, but this one's one that I'm a part of. I don't get on there and like chat a lot, but I keep my eye on it, and it's vetted. We both can vouch for it being a reputable, helpful resource. So that's it. Any last words before we're at 8:01 my time? 8:01. I'm in Texas, so.
No, but just thank you. This has been wonderful experience.
It's been fun. I learned. I have a little thing where I wrote lots of notes, and I'm going to sit down and write notes after we close, so I don't forget them.
You can call me anytime if you want to chat about anything else.
Well, I've got you at my fingertips. I know how to get a hold of her.
The social media channel is blowing up right now with the thanks for you, Susan and Alicia. So thanks you again from all the people who are listening in tonight.
Are you on LinkedIn too? You are, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so go look for both of us on LinkedIn, and we probably have a lot of network opportunities. When you're on LinkedIn, you can go and find out who we're connected with and see if anybody in our, whatever they call it, group could help you or assist you. So do that. It takes the time.
I would just say on LinkedIn, always there's so much scamming on LinkedIn and Facebook. If whenever you send someone an invite, include one sentence that lets the person know that you're a real person. You're not, somebody who's looking for a girlfriend or.
I get it's like you add them, and then all of a sudden they're like, "How are you feeling today?" Okay, no. 99% of everybody that I have on my LinkedIn connections are in the medical field.
Yeah.
And some of them are in the oil field. I keep getting these guys from oil drill or something. Oh, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget, we'll have another CCO Live with another guest. I think Barbara Kabouzi, I think she's said that she'd be able to come in and talk to us. And she does some stuff similar to what Susan does.
She's got a plethora of knowledge. I'll be sure to tune in for that one. She likes to
talk about it too. We won't be able to get a word in edgewise if you get both of us together, will it? So, all right, guys. Thank you so much, and keep talking in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that other good social media stuff that they do. Send people out to Susan's website if you think that she can benefit you. And again, don't forget to connect with cco.us and the CCO Club. All right, guys. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Susan.